The massive space station called New Geneva floated in the darkness between stars like a bright jewel. Inside its gleaming halls, beings from 13 different worlds worked together in ways that would have seemed impossible just 50 years ago. Ambassador John Martinez walked through the central corridor, nodding to the tall blue Zephyrians and the crystal-like Valdris, who sparkled as they moved. The air hummed with dozens of different languages, but translation devices made every word clear. John had been humanity's voice on the Galactic Cooperation Council for 8 years now. He still remembered his first day here, when the other species had looked at humans with curiosity mixed with caution. Back then, Earth was the newest member, the young species that had only just learned to travel between stars. Now things were very different. Humans had proven themselves valuable partners in ways nobody had expected. He entered the main council chamber where today's session was about to begin. The room was huge, with seats arranged in a perfect circle so no species sat higher than another. Each delegation had their own section designed for their unique needs. The aquatic dolphins floated in their water-filled pods, while the insect-like Mentari perched on specially built platforms. John took his place at the human section, a simple arrangement of comfortable chairs that could have come from any office building on Earth. "Today we celebrate another successful joint mission," announced the council speaker, an elderly Zephyrian whose blue skin had faded to pale silver with age. "The medical relief effort to Tau Gamma has saved over 2 million lives thanks to the combined efforts of our member species." John smiled as he remembered Dr. Susan Clark's report from that mission. The plague on Tau Gamma had puzzled alien doctors for months, but Susan and her team had found a cure in just 3 weeks. She had worked day and night with Valdris crystal healers and Etherian mind doctors, combining human medical knowledge with alien techniques in ways that created something entirely new. The Valdris delegate rose, her crystal body catching the light and throwing rainbow patterns across the walls. When she spoke, her voice sounded like wind chimes. "We must acknowledge the exceptional contribution of the human medical team. Their approach to biological problems continues to surprise and inspire us." Other delegates nodded in agreement. The dolphins clicked and whistled their approval while the Mentari buzzed in their own language. John felt a warm pride in his chest. 30 years ago, when first contact had been made, many aliens had seen humans as primitive and dangerous. Some had even suggested that Earth should be quarantined until humanity grew more civilized. Now those same species praised human innovation and creativity. Captain Lisa Adams was somewhere out in space right now, commanding the research vessel Explorer on another joint mission. Her crew included the best minds from 5 different species, all working together to map unknown regions of the galaxy. Dr. Peter Johnson, her chief scientist, had recently developed improvements to quantum drive technology that cut travel time between stars by 40%. The other species had been amazed at how quickly humans could take existing ideas and make them better. Commander Kate Wilson had done something similar with military tactics. Though her work focused on peace rather than war, she had helped establish the trade route protection system that kept merchant ships safe from pirates and raiders. Her strategies combined human psychological insight with alien technology to create solutions that were both effective and humane. John thought about all the other humans working throughout the galaxy. There were teachers on Zephyrian worlds, helping young aliens understand emotion and creativity. Human engineers worked alongside Valdris craftsmen to build space stations that were both beautiful and practical. Human farmers had introduced new growing techniques that helped feed hungry populations on a dozen different worlds. The session continued with reports from various committees. The Trade Commission announced record profits for all member species. The Science Council shared news of breakthrough discoveries in physics and biology. The Cultural Exchange Program reported successful festivals and celebrations that had brought different species closer together. As the day's business concluded, John noticed something that had become common lately. Small groups of non-human delegates stood together, speaking in low voices and glancing occasionally toward the human section. Their body language suggested they were discussing something important. something they didn't want humans to overhear. He had seen this behavior more and more often in recent months. Nothing dramatic, just quiet conversations that stopped when humans approached. Private meetings that happened without human representatives. Technical discussions that somehow never included human experts, even when the topic was something humans had helped develop. John told himself he was being paranoid. After 30 years of successful cooperation, why would the other species suddenly become secretive? Humans had proven themselves loyal allies and valuable partners. They had shared their knowledge freely and asked for nothing but friendship. In return, the Etherean delegate approached him as the chamber emptied. These beings looked almost human except for their pale skin and large, dark eyes. Ambassador Martinez, your people continue to impress us with their achievements. Thank you, John replied. We're proud to be part of this council. Yes, of course, the Etherean said, but something in his tone made John pause. Though perhaps it would be wise for humanity to consider the pace of its growth. Rapid change can sometimes create instability. Before John could ask what he meant, the delegate had glided away, leaving John alone in the vast chamber with a growing sense that the golden days of cooperation might not last forever. 3 years had passed since that strange conversation with the Etherean delegate, and John Martinez had almost convinced himself that his worries were unfounded, almost the emergency alert that screamed through New Geneva's communication system at 0300 hours reminded him that the galaxy was never as peaceful as it seemed. Dr. Susan Clark received the call while she was reviewing research data in her laboratory on Earth. The message was urgent and desperate. Kepler 442b, an agricultural world that fed nearly 6 billion people across 3 star systems, was dying. A mysterious blight had appeared without warning, destroying crops faster than anyone could study it. The planet's food production had dropped by 60% in just 2 weeks. Susan packed her equipment and assembled her team within 6 hours. By the time her ship reached Kepler 442b, the situation had become a full disaster. Endless fields that had once grown golden grain now stretched like brown deserts. Farmers stood helplessly as their crops withered and died before their eyes. The local government had declared a planetary emergency and begged the Galactic Council for immediate help. The human medical team worked alongside alien specialists from 7 different species. The Valdris brought their crystal-based healing techniques, while the dolphins contributed their advanced understanding of biological systems. The Etherians offered their mental powers to study the blight at a molecular level. But weeks passed with no progress. Susan noticed that her alien colleagues seemed to be working more slowly than usual. Their suggestions were cautious and traditional, following established procedures rather than trying bold new approaches. When she proposed combining human genetic therapy with Valdris crystal resonance, several team members expressed concern about the safety of such experiments. We must be careful not to make the situation worse, warned Dr. Hexstar, the Zephyrian team leader. Rapid solutions often create unexpected problems. But Susan could see that careful, traditional methods were not working. Every day of delay meant more death and suffering. She made a decision that would later be seen as both heroic and dangerous. Working with a small group of human researchers, she developed a treatment that combined 3 different alien technologies in ways that had never been tried before. The cure worked perfectly. Within days of its application, the dying crops began to recover. Within weeks, Kepler 442b was producing food again. Billions of lives were saved, and the grateful population celebrated their human rescuers as heroes. However, the reaction from the Galactic Council was not what Susan had expected. Instead of praise, she faced sharp questions about her methods. A formal inquiry was launched to investigate whether humans had acted recklessly by combining alien technologies without proper authorization. The human team exceeded their mandate, stated the Etherean investigator. They performed dangerous experiments without consulting the proper committees or following established safety protocols. John Martinez found himself defending his species. Actions in increasingly hostile council sessions. Dr. Clark saved billions of lives, he pointed out. How can that be considered reckless? The ends do not justify the means, replied the Mentari delegate. What if their experiment had failed? What if it had made the blight worse? Humans act too quickly without considering all possible consequences. Lieutenant Colonel Jake Morrison began noticing other troubling signs during this same period. As security chief for human installations throughout the galaxy, he had access to intelligence reports that painted a disturbing picture. Several species had increased their surveillance of human colonies and research facilities. Ships with no official purpose were detected near human space stations, always careful to stay just outside the boundaries that would make their presence illegal. When Jake brought these concerns to the Council's Security Committee, he was told that the surveillance was routine and nothing to worry about. All member species conduct normal intelligence gathering, explained the committee chairman, a crystal being whose true thoughts were impossible to read. This is standard practice for maintaining galactic security. But Jake had been a soldier before he became a diplomat, and he knew the difference between routine monitoring and targeted surveillance. The pattern was clear to anyone who knew how to look. Several species were watching humanity very carefully, gathering information about human capabilities and weaknesses. The real crisis came during the vote on mining rights in the Tau Ceti system. Humans had discovered the system 5 years earlier and had invested enormous resources in exploring and developing its rich asteroid fields. The initial surveys had been conducted by human ships, the mining equipment had been designed by human engineers, and human workers had built the extraction facilities. When the formal vote came to award long-term mining rights, John expected an easy victory. Humans had done all the work and taken all the risks. By every principle of galactic law and common sense, the rights should go to Earth. Instead, he watched in shock as species after species voted against humanity. The Zephyrians, who had been close allies for decades, abstained from voting. The Dolphins, who had worked closely with human scientists on underwater projects, cast their vote for a consortium of older species. Even the Valdris, who had learned so much from human emotion and creativity, chose to support the alien coalition. The final vote was 11-1 against humanity, with only Earth supporting its own claim. The mining rights went to a group of species that had contributed nothing to the system's development, but who promised to share the profits according to a complex formula that somehow excluded humans entirely. This decision is based on the need for galactic stability, explained the council speaker after the vote. The Tau Ceti system is too strategically important to be controlled by a single species, especially one that expands as rapidly as humanity. John sat in stunned silence as the implications sank in. Humans were being punished not for doing anything wrong, but for being too successful, too innovative, too quick to seize opportunities. The other species had decided that humanity was growing too powerful and needed to be controlled. Dr. Amy Foster made the most disturbing discovery of all while working on improvements to the Galactic Communication Network. Her job required access to data routing systems that carried messages between different species' homeworlds. While tracking down a technical problem, she found encrypted communications that weren't supposed to exist. The messages were carefully hidden, but Amy was an expert in quantum communication theory. She eventually cracked the encryption and discovered a secret network that had been operating for months. The communications revealed detailed discussions between 8 different species about the human problem and various strategies for limiting human influence in galactic affairs. The most chilling message came from a higher-ranking Etherian official who wrote about humans as if they were dangerous animals that needed to be contained. Their unpredictable nature and rapid advancement threaten the stability we have worked so hard to create. We must act soon before they become too powerful to control. Amy printed copies of the most important messages and delivered them directly to Ambassador Martinez. As she handed over the evidence of betrayal, she saw something die in John's eyes. The man who had believed in galactic cooperation for 8 years suddenly understood that humanity had been walking into a trap. The colony of New Dallas had been humanity's proudest achievement in the Outer Rim territories. Built on a world with rich soil and clean air, it housed nearly 2 million people who had traveled 40 light-years from Earth to start new lives. Governor Rick Taylor had watched the settlement grow from a collection of temporary shelters into a thriving city with schools, hospitals, and research centers that rivaled anything in human space. The attack came without warning in the early hours of a Tuesday morning. Rick was reviewing agricultural reports when his communication system exploded with emergency signals from across the planet. Unidentified ships had appeared in orbit and were launching strike craft toward the surface. The raiders moved with military precision, hitting power plants, communication hubs, and government buildings before the colonists could even understand what was happening. Rick tried to contact the Galactic Council's Emergency Response Center, but something was wrong with the communication networks. His messages seemed to go through, but no responses came back. The colony's defense systems, designed to handle pirates and small raiders, were completely overwhelmed by the size and coordination of the attacking force. The assault lasted for 18 hours. When it finally ended, half of New Dallas lay in ruins. The attackers had targeted civilian areas with particular cruelty, destroying hospitals and schools while leaving military facilities relatively untouched. It was as if they wanted to cause maximum suffering rather than achieve any strategic objective. Rick stood in the smoking remains of the Central Hospital and tried to make sense of the devastation. Dr. Rachel Davis, who had been working in the pediatric ward when the attack began, pulled him aside with tears streaming down her face. "The children's wing took a direct hit," she whispered. "We lost 200 kids, Rick, 200 innocent children." The rescue ships finally arrived 36 hours after the attack began. Rick had expected to see Council vessels rushing to help, but the response fleet moved slowly and seemed reluctant to provide assistance. When the rescue coordinator finally met with Rick, his explanation for the delay was bureaucratic nonsense about proper authorization procedures and safety protocols. Commander Steve Rogers arrived 3 days later to lead the official investigation. Steve had served in human military forces before joining the Council's Security Division, and he brought both experience and determination to his work. What he found in the wreckage of New Dallas made him sick with rage. The attacking ships had used weapons that were clearly not pirate technology. Energy signature analysis showed that the raiders had been equipped with military-grade Zephyrian pulse cannons and Etherian stealth systems. Even more damning was the discovery of coordinated communication equipment that could only have been provided by Council member species. Steve spent weeks following the evidence trail, working with a small team of human investigators who shared his growing suspicion that the attack had not been random. Banking records showed large payments from Zephyrian accounts to known mercenary groups just days before the assault. Etherian diplomatic communications revealed coded messages about teaching lessons and demonstrating consequences. To species that expanded too aggressively, the smoking gun came from a damaged raider ship that had crashed during the retreat. Inside its computer core, Steve found navigation data that proved the attackers had received detailed intelligence about New Dallas's defenses and weak points. The information was so precise that it could only have come from Council security files that were supposed to be classified. When Steve presented his findings to the full Council, he expected swift justice for the perpetrators. Instead, he encountered a wall of denial and bureaucratic obstruction. The Zephyrian delegate claimed that the banking records were falsified. The Etherian representative suggested that the communications were taken out of context. The other species either remained silent or actively supported these obviously false explanations. Ambassador Martinez watched the proceedings with growing horror as it became clear that the Council had no intention of pursuing justice for New Dallas. When the final vote came on whether to formally investigate the evidence of Council involvement in the attack, only humanity voted in favor. 12 species voted against the investigation while one abstained, the Council Speaker, the same elderly. Zephyrian, who had once praised human contributions to galactic civilization, delivered the final insult with calm professionalism. The evidence presented by the human investigation team is inconclusive and potentially fabricated. This council finds no credible proof of member species involvement in the regrettable incident at New Dallas. The speaker paused and looked directly at John Martinez before continuing. However, this tragedy does highlight the dangers of aggressive human expansion into contested territories. The Council recommends that humanity consider more careful colony placement to avoid future conflicts with established regional interests. John felt something snap inside his chest as he realized what he was hearing. The Council was not only refusing to punish the species that had murdered 2 million human civilians, they were actually blaming humanity for the attack. According to the galactic government, humans had deserved to die because they had built homes on a world that other species wanted for themselves. The final betrayal came 2 weeks later when the Council voted on new colonial guidance protocols that would place all future human expansion under alien oversight. The protocols required humans to submit detailed plans for any new settlements to a committee dominated by non-human species. These same species would have veto power over human colonial efforts and the right to inspect human facilities at any time. The vote was unanimous except for humanity's single voice of opposition. Even species that had once been close allies supported the new restrictions. The dolphins, who had worked with humans on underwater cities, voted to limit human expansion. The Valdres, who had learned art and music from human teachers, chose bureaucratic control over friendship. Dr. Rachel Davis sat in the observer's gallery and watched 12 species vote to treat humanity like children who could not be trusted with their own decisions. She thought about the 200 dead children in New Dallas and realized that their deaths had been used as an excuse to justify the very oppression that had caused their murder. After the vote, John Martinez walked through the corridors of New Geneva for what he knew would be the last time as a true representative of his species. The alien delegates he passed nodded politely and offered false sympathy for the difficult decision the Council had been forced to make. Some even suggested that the new protocols would be good for humanity in the long run, helping them become more mature and responsible members of the galactic community. John smiled and thanked them for their concern, but behind his diplomatic mask, he was calculating distances to the nearest quantum communication array. Earth needed to know what had happened here, and more importantly, Earth needed to understand what humanity would have to do next. The golden age of cooperation was over. The Council had made their choice, and now humanity would make theirs. The only question was whether the aliens would realize their mistake before it was too late to undo the damage they had done to themselves. 6 months after the Council's vote to place humanity under alien oversight, something subtle began to change in human space. The changes were so small and gradual that the galactic government's monitoring systems detected nothing unusual. Trade continued as normal, diplomatic communications remained polite and professional, and human representatives continued attending council meetings with their usual dedication. Ambassador John Martinez still walked the halls of New Geneva every day, participating in committee hearings and cultural events as if nothing had changed. His reports back to Earth became shorter and more formal, but this seemed natural given the increased restrictions on human activities. When alien colleagues asked about human compliance with the new colonial guidance protocols, John assured them that his government was reviewing all requirements carefully. What the aliens did not know was that John's real communications with Earth now traveled through encrypted quantum channels that bypassed all council monitoring systems. Dr. Amy Foster had quietly modified the communication networks before the surveillance protocols could be fully implemented, creating hidden pathways that appeared to be routine technical maintenance traffic. Captain Lisa Adams received new orders that seemed perfectly normal on the surface. Her research vessel, Explorer, was assigned to conduct routine astronomical surveys in uninhabited systems beyond the established trade routes. The missions appeared to be standard scientific work, the kind of deep space exploration that humans had been doing for decades. But Lisa's real mission was very different from what appeared in the official records. Each system she visited was carefully evaluated for its potential as a human settlement. She mapped asteroid fields rich in rare metals, identified planets with breathable atmospheres, and located strategic positions that could support defensive installations. Her surveys created a detailed database of resources and opportunities that existed far beyond Council oversight. The alien species noticed nothing suspicious about these exploration missions. Humans had always been curious about unknown regions of space, and scientific research was exactly the kind of activity that the Council wanted to encourage instead of aggressive colonization. If anything, they approved of humanity's apparent shift toward peaceful scientific work. Dr. Peter Johnson worked in a classified research facility that officially did not exist. His project, codenamed Exodus Drive, was listed in government records as an improvement to existing quantum propulsion systems. The funding came from agricultural development budgets and educational grants, scattered across dozens of different departments to avoid drawing attention. In reality, Peter was developing technology that would allow human ships to travel beyond the known galaxy. Traditional quantum drives could move ships between stars within the Milky Way, but Peter's new system would enable journeys to distant galaxies where no alien species had ever traveled. The energy requirements were enormous, but human fusion technology had advanced far beyond what other species realized. Peter's team worked in complete secrecy, knowing that their research would be seen as a threat by the Council. The aliens wanted humanity to remain within their sphere of influence, subject to oversight and control. The idea that humans might simply leave the galaxy entirely would terrify them more than any military weapon across human space. Subtle preparations began in response to coded instructions from Earth. Colonial administrators received transfer orders to frontier development positions that happened to be near major spaceports. Essential personnel found themselves reassigned to agricultural research facilities that were actually staging areas for evacuation operations. Construction projects that appeared to be industrial improvements were actually building ships and supply depots. A new mining station in the asteroid belt was really a massive ship assembly facility. Habitat domes on remote moons were designed to be easily converted into colony ships. Scientific outposts in distant systems were actually supply caches, positioned along planned evacuation routes. The most impressive deception involved the apparent expansion of human agriculture throughout settled space. Hundreds of new farms and food processing centers were built, creating the impression that humanity was settling in for a long period of peaceful development. In reality, these facilities were producing and storing the supplies that would be needed to sustain millions of people during a journey that might last for years. Governor Rick Taylor, who had survived the destruction of New Dallas, found himself appointed to oversee refugee resettlement programs for the survivors of the attack. His official job was to help displaced colonists find new homes within established human territory. His real mission was to coordinate the evacuation of entire planetary populations, using transportation networks that were being built under the cover of humanitarian relief efforts. Rick worked with quiet efficiency, knowing that every human life depended on the success of their secret preparations. The aliens believed they had taught humanity a lesson about the consequences of independence. They had no idea that the lesson humans actually learned was that they could never be safe while remaining under alien control. Dr. Susan Clark received an assignment to establish medical research stations in remote systems that were supposedly being prepared for eventual colonization pending Council approval. These stations were actually equipped as mobile hospitals capable of supporting large populations during extended space travel. Susan's teams trained for medical emergencies that might occur during multi-year voyages to unknown destinations. The training exercises were disguised as preparation for deep space exploration missions, which the Council heartily approved. They wanted humans to focus on safe scientific work rather than aggressive expansion. So medical support for long-range research seemed like exactly the kind of responsible activity they wanted to encourage. Commander Kate Wilson worked on what appeared to be improvements to existing human defense systems. Her official reports described upgrades to orbital platforms and patrol ships that would better protect human colonies from pirate attacks. The Council Security Committee approved these defensive measures as reasonable precautions. Kate's real work involved designing escort systems for the largest civilian evacuation in galactic history. Her defensive improvements were actually components of a mobile fleet capable of protecting colony ships during their journey to distant galaxies. Every weapon system and shield generator was designed to be rapidly transferred from fixed installations to evacuation vessels. The most challenging aspect of the preparation was maintaining normal relationships with alien partners while planning to abandon them forever. Human scientists continued collaborating on joint research projects, knowing that their alien colleagues would wake up one morning to find their human partners gone without explanation. Human diplomats attended social gatherings and cultural exchanges, smiling and making pleasant conversation while calculating exactly how much time remained before the exodus began. Admiral Tony Bennett received command of the operation during its final planning phase. His appointment as Director of Colonial Security Coordination seemed like a natural response to the new Dallas attack and the Council's new oversight requirements. In reality, he was the military commander who would oversee the largest migration in human history. Tony understood that the operation would have to be perfect on the first attempt. There would be no second chances, no opportunity to correct mistakes, or return for supplies that were left behind. Every human ship would have to launch simultaneously and disappear into unknown space before the aliens realized what was happening. The psychological pressure on everyone involved was enormous. But humans had learned to hide their true feelings behind masks of polite cooperation. They attended council meetings and cultural events, participated in joint research projects, and maintained diplomatic relationships. While secretly counting down the days until they would leave the galaxy forever, the aliens noticed nothing because they saw only what they expected to see, a defeated species learning to accept their proper place in the galactic order. The morning of the departure began like any other day in human space. Workers reported to their jobs, children attended schools, and merchants conducted business as usual. The only difference was a subtle tension in the air, the kind of nervous energy that comes from keeping an enormous secret for too long. At precisely 08:00 hours Galactic Standard Time, Admiral Tony Bennett sent a single coded transmission from his headquarters on Luna. The message consisted of just 2 words that had been chosen months earlier: Exodus authorized. Within minutes, similar signals flashed through hidden communication networks to every human world, station, and ship in the galaxy. The response was immediate and perfectly coordinated. Across dozens of star systems, evacuation sirens began wailing as people dropped whatever they were doing and headed for designated assembly points. Families who had practiced these drills in secret now executed them for real, carrying prepared bags and moving with calm efficiency toward the spaceports. Captain Lisa Adams sat on the bridge of the Explorer as her ship's sensors detected the massive energy signatures that marked the beginning of the exodus. Hundreds of ships were launching simultaneously from Earth's orbital stations. The planet that had given birth to humanity was emptying itself of human life with mechanical precision. Lisa felt a mixture of sadness and excitement as she watched the evacuation unfold. Humanity was abandoning the homeworld that had nurtured them for millions of years, but they were also escaping the cage that other species had tried to build around them. The stars beckoned with infinite possibilities, and humans were finally free to explore them without asking permission from anyone. The first ships to launch were the massive colony vessels that had been disguised as industrial platforms and mining stations. These enormous craft had been built in secret over the past year, capable of sustaining entire populations during the long journey to distant galaxies. Each ship carried 10,000 people along with everything they would need to build new civilizations among unknown stars. Governor Rick Taylor supervised the evacuation of the outer colonies, watching as transport ships loaded families and essential equipment with practiced efficiency. The people boarding these vessels had lost everything once before when New Dallas was destroyed. Now they were voluntarily leaving behind whatever new lives they had built, trusting that freedom was worth Any sacrifice. Rick thought about the children who were seeing their homeworlds for the last time. They would grow up among the stars, citizens of a truly free human civilization that owed nothing to alien oversight. The price of that freedom was abandoning everything familiar, but Rick believed it was a price worth paying. Dr. Peter Johnson watched his Exodus drives power up for the first time under full operational conditions. The new quantum systems hummed with barely contained energy, ready to push human ships beyond the edge of the known galaxy. Years of theoretical work and secret testing had led to this moment when humanity would finally use technology that surpassed anything the Council possessed. Peter felt a deep satisfaction as he realized that human innovation had once again exceeded alien expectations. The Council had tried to limit human advancement through bureaucratic control, but they had only succeeded in driving human research underground where it had flourished in complete secrecy. The alien response to the Exodus was confusion followed by growing alarm as monitoring stations throughout the galaxy detected the massive movement of human ships. Council communication networks buzzed with urgent messages as delegates tried to understand what was happening. Ambassador John Martinez had remained at New Geneva to deliver humanity's final message to the Galactic Council. He entered the Council chamber for the last time, carrying a simple datapad that contained humanity's official explanation for their departure. The other delegates were already assembled in emergency session, their faces showing various expressions of shock and bewilderment. The Zephyrian speaker called for order as John took his place at the human delegation table. Ambassador Martinez, the speaker said, his blue skin pale with stress, we demand an immediate explanation for the unauthorized mass movement of human vessels. These actions violate several Council regulations regarding colonial activities and defensive positioning. John stood slowly and activated his datapad. His voice was calm and professional as he read humanity's final statement to the galaxy. The people of Earth and all human settlements hereby formally withdraw from the Galactic Cooperation Council, effective immediately. We renounce all treaties, agreements, and obligations that bind us to this organization and its member species. The chamber erupted in shocked voices as delegates tried to process what they were hearing. John continued reading without pause. Humanity has concluded that our values and goals are incompatible with the direction this council has chosen to pursue. We therefore exercise our right to seek our destiny among the stars without interference from other species. The Etherean delegate rose from his seat, his large dark eyes filled with something that might have been panic. This action is illegal under galactic law. You cannot simply abandon your responsibilities to the greater community. John looked directly at the alien who had once suggested that humanity needed to be controlled before they became too dangerous. We are abandoning nothing that we ever truly possessed. Our membership in this council was conditional upon our acceptance of alien oversight and restrictions on our natural development. Since we can no longer accept these conditions, we choose to leave. The Mentari representative buzzed angrily in their insect language before switching to Galactic Common. Where do you think you can go? This galaxy belongs to all of us. You cannot escape your obligations by running away. John smiled for the first time in months as he delivered the final surprise. We are not running away within this galaxy. Humanity is leaving the Milky Way entirely, seeking new homes among distant stars where we can build the kind of civilization our people deserve. The silence that followed this announcement was deafening. Every alien in the chamber stared at John with expressions of disbelief and growing horror as they realized the implications of what he had just said. Dr. Susan Clark was aboard the hospital ship Mercy when the first colony vessels activated their Exodus drives and vanished from normal space. The quantum signatures were unlike anything ever seen before, creating ripples in space-time that indicated travel to destinations beyond the edge of the known. Galaxy. Susan watched through the medical bay windows as Earth grew smaller behind them. She had spent her entire career working to heal and save lives throughout the galaxy, often collaborating with alien colleagues who had become close friends. Now, she was leaving all of that behind forever, but she felt no regret. the alien species, had made their choice when they decided that human innovation was a threat rather than a gift. They had chosen fear over friendship, control over cooperation. Now they would have to live with the consequences of those decisions. Within 6 hours of Admiral Bennett's initial signal, every human presence in the galaxy had simply vanished. Orbital stations stood empty but undamaged, their automated systems still functioning perfectly. Research facilities had been abandoned with their equipment intact but their databanks wiped clean. Not a single human remained behind to answer questions or provide explanations. The great exodus was complete, and humanity had departed silently into the infinite darkness beyond the stars, leaving the Galactic Council alone with their regrets. 5 years had passed since the morning when humanity vanished from the galaxy, and the Galactic Cooperation Council was discovering that some losses could never be replaced. The empty seats in the council chamber served as a constant reminder of what had been lost through fear and short-sighted thinking. The crisis began on Valdris Prime when children started falling sick with a mysterious illness that caused their crystal bodies to lose their natural glow. The disease spread quickly through the population, affecting both young and old with symptoms that baffled every medical expert in the galaxy. Within weeks, thousands were dying and panic gripped the crystal cities. Dr. Hexstar led the medical response team that included specialists from every remaining council species. The Zephyrian physician had once worked alongside Dr. Susan Clark during the Kepler 442b plague crisis, and he remembered how quickly the human doctor had found solutions to seemingly impossible problems. Now, facing a similar crisis without human assistance, Hexstar found himself struggling with approaches that seemed clumsy and slow compared to the innovative techniques he had witnessed years earlier. The alien medical teams followed established protocols and consulted ancient databases, but none of their traditional methods proved effective against the new disease. "We need to think like humans," Hexstar told his colleagues during a desperate strategy meeting. "They would have combined our technologies in ways we never consider, creating solutions that none of us could develop alone." But thinking like humans proved impossible for species that had spent millennia following careful, conservative approaches to every problem. The alien doctors continued their methodical research while the death toll climbed higher each day. Ambassador Kextel of the Etherian Union spent sleepless nights reviewing archived recordings of human council sessions, searching for clues about how their former colleagues had approached complex problems. She found herself watching old footage of John Martinez presenting innovative solutions with passionate conviction, and she felt a deep shame about her species' role in driving humanity away. During those years when humans had been active council members, problems had been solved quickly through creative collaboration between species. Human emotional insight had helped resolve disputes. Human engineering had improved galactic infrastructure, and human medical knowledge had saved countless lives. Now those same types of problems lingered for months without resolution. The Dolphins struggled with trade route efficiency calculations that had once been solved easily through human mathematical innovations. Complex logistics problems that humans had approached with intuitive leaps now required enormous committees and extended deliberations that produced mediocre results. The Mentari colonial development projects fell behind schedule without the rapid construction techniques that humans had pioneered. What had once taken months to complete now required years of careful planning and conservative implementation. Even cultural activities suffered without human participation. The annual Galactic Arts Festival had become a subdued affair, lacking the emotional energy and creative surprise that human artists had always brought to the celebration. The remaining species created beautiful works, but nothing that captured the passionate intensity that had made the festival truly memorable. The Valdris delegates spent hours in the abandoned human quarters of New Geneva, walking through rooms that had been left exactly as they were on the day of the Exodus. Personal items remained on desks, family photos sat on shelves, and coffee cups still bore the residue of final morning beverages. The crystal being found herself crying diamond tears as she realized how much warmth and life had disappeared with humanity. The worst realization came when the council tried to contact human space to request assistance with the plague crisis. Long-range sensors detected no trace of human civilization anywhere in the galaxy. The quantum signatures from their Exodus drives had pointed toward destinations beyond the galactic rim, but no monitoring station had been able to track their final destination. Humanity had simply vanished into the infinite darkness between galaxies, taking their knowledge, innovation, and friendship to places where the Council could never follow. They were building new civilizations among distant stars, free from the restrictions and oversight that had driven them away. The Council's attempts to recreate human technologies met with limited success. Engineers could copy existing human designs, but they could not replicate the innovative thinking that had created those designs in the first place. The missing element was the human approach to problems, the willingness to take risks and try. Unprecedented combinations of existing knowledge, Speaker Zaran, who had replaced the elderly Zephyrian who died shortly after the human departure, called for a formal review of the decisions that had led to humanity's exodus. The investigation revealed a pattern of fear-based choices that had steadily eroded the trust between humans and other species. "We treated innovation as a threat instead of a gift," the speaker concluded in his final report. "We punished creativity because it made us uncomfortable, and we destroyed the friendship of the one species that could have helped us reach our true potential as a galactic civilization." The report included detailed analysis of economic data showing that galactic prosperity had declined steadily since the human departure. Trade volumes were down, scientific breakthroughs had nearly stopped, and cultural exchange between species had become formal and sterile. The monitoring stations that watched the void beyond the galaxy occasionally detected faint quantum signatures that suggested massive construction projects in distant space. Long-range telescopes captured brief glimpses of energy patterns that looked like the signatures of advanced civilizations, but always at distances too great for detailed observation. Humanity was out there somewhere, building something magnificent among alien stars, and the galaxy they had left behind would never know what wonders they might have shared if treated with respect instead of suspicion. The Council passed a formal resolution, acknowledging their mistakes and officially inviting humanity to return whenever they chose to resume contact. The resolution was broadcast on all frequencies toward the galactic rim, carrying messages of apology and promises that things would be different if humans ever came back, but the silence from the void remained absolute. No human ship had been detected in galactic space since the day of the Exodus. No response came to the Council's broadcasts of reconciliation. Humanity had moved beyond the reach of their former neighbors, carrying their dreams and potential to places where they could flourish without fear of interference. The empty human embassy on New Geneva was converted into a memorial museum, preserving examples of human art, technology, and culture for future generations to study. School children from various species learned about the civilization that had once shared the galaxy with them, and many wondered what their lives might have been like if humans had stayed. The most painful exhibit was a recording of the final Council session, showing Ambassador John Martinez delivering humanity's farewell message with quiet dignity. Visitors often stood for long minutes listening to his words and imagining how different things might have been if the Council had chosen cooperation over control. As years passed into decades, the memory of humanity became a legend that haunted the galactic civilization. They were remembered as the species that had offered friendship and innovation but had been driven away by fear and prejudice. Their absence served as a constant reminder of the price of choosing safety over progress. The galaxy continued to function without humans, but it had lost something essential that could never be replaced. The spark of unpredictable creativity, the warmth of emotional connection, and the courage to risk everything for the chance of something better had departed with the ships that carried humanity beyond the stars. In the vast darkness between galaxies, human civilization grew and flourished in ways that the Council would never see or understand. They had chosen their freedom over galactic approval, and that choice had led them to destinies that surpassed the limited vision of species who valued control more than possibility.